stocks lose their ground today on profit booking and after the strong run-up in the recent past. Now, metals as well as IT take a beating, while utilities eke out gains. Midcaps outperform.
The Supreme Court backs SEBI by rejecting the transfer of the Adani-Hindenburg case to CBI. It also gives the regulator 3 months to conclude its probe and allows it to examine the need for regulatory changes as well as any violation of norms in short selling by Hindenburg.
Hero MotoCorp slips after sales see a dip in the month of December on soft motorcycle sales despite a pickup in the scooter offtake. The company expects positive momentum in the fourth quarter.
And ace investor Radhakishan Damani picks up a slice of VST Industries in block deals on Tuesday, while veteran Akash Prakash's firm Mansa Capital buys into Strides Pharma via the block window.
Hello and welcome. You've tuned into Business Lunch. I'm Nisha Podar. As always, with me, my co-anchor Pavitra Parekh. Pavitra, good afternoon. So yet another day of profit booking today, and at the moment close to about 0.5% down on Nifty 50. So let's take stock of markets at lunch hour today. Nifty 50 at 21,566 odd levels. Sensex 2 is losing about 335 points at the moment. Bank Nifty is the one which is showing much more resilience at the moment compared to Nifty as well as Sensex. It's down marginally in trade, and mid-caps, that's a spot of resilience with profits there, gains there of 0.35%. So that's the overall picture of the market, and mid-cap universe performing better than some of the frontline indices is definitely aiding to the strength of the market, where advances are higher than the declines. If you look at some of the counters, of course, Adani group of stocks have had a very stock impacting movement through the day because of the court ruling, and also ITC, that is the top gainer in terms of percentage. Some of the PSU stocks like BPCL, ONGC are top gainers, and on the flip side, some of the metal counters and auto counters, including IT, also are the ones which are dragging Nifty 50, Pavitra.
Oh, absolutely. So like you said, it's another, slow day for our own market. Some more profit booking seen, and this is across the globe. So pick up any Asian markets, it's seeing gains of cuts of between 1 to 2%. Same thing playing out in our own markets. But like Nisha was pointing out, the move that we're seeing in the mid-cap index is very encouraging. At one point, we were down around 300 points or so. So we've come off very well from those levels. Advanced decline also positive right now. You have almost 1,700 stocks which are gaining, for just around 1,400 which are in the red right now. Of course, the PSU is doing well. A lot of the smaller banks, names like Bank of Maharashtra, Canara Bank doing well. You have on the downside, of course, it is largely about the IT names today, in addition to some that we spoke about. So names like LTI, Mindtree, Wipro, seeing some cuts. Infosys is down over 2%. Even from the broader markets, you have names like Emphasis and Persistent, where a bulk of the pressure is coming in because of the move that we saw in US tech as well. So that is the shape of the market. But let's kickstart the show now by talking about that big story which we mentioned, which is the Supreme Court, in its judgment on the Adani-Hindenburg case, says that there is no ground to transfer probe and ask SEBI to complete its investigation in the 2 cases which are left. So 22 have been completed and 2 more have to be completed in the next 3 months. Ashmit is joining us now to tell us more about this. Ashmit.
Well, coming out of the winter break, a big judgment coming in from the Apex Court on the Adani-Hindenburg matter. Here are the key takeaways. Number one, the Supreme Court holds that as far as the regulatory framework is concerned, it's all good, it's all kosher. Nothing wrong with the FPI regulations, nothing wrong with the LODR regulations, and far from loosening up, they've been tightened even further. That's number one. Second, the Supreme Court observed that as far as the investigations into Adani are concerned, SEBI has completed 22 out of 24 investigations. The balance to be completed in 3 months' time, and the 22 investigations which have been completed are to be taken to their logical conclusion. On 3 key questions, the Supreme Court giving an overwhelming no. No case made out for transfer of case to CBI. no case made out for treating the likes of OCCRP report and the Hindenburg report as concrete proof. And thirdly, no case made out for treating the members of the expert committee to be in any source of conflict of interest. And finally, with respect to a forward-looking guidance, what the Supreme Court has said is that the recommendations that had been given by the expert committee are to be considered by SEBI as well as the Centre for Tightening of the Regulatory Framework. And finally, on the question of short selling by Hindenburg, on that question, the Apex Court ruling that SEBI is to investigate whether this short selling has caused infraction of any Indian laws and whether any suitable action is required.
All right. Thanks, Ashmit, for giving us the entire account of this important case today. And that's coming in from the courtroom. In fact, we spoke to a whole host of experts on this matter and what they make of this particular ruling and the way forward and the impact, as well as precedents. Here out Sailesh Haribhakti as well as Amit Nayak on this particular development of Supreme Court's verdict on Adani.
Direction of the court is very clear. They are saying they have full trust in our very prime regulator, SEBI. They've given them a reasonable time of 2 months.
I think Supreme Court has come down absolutely correctly, and the decision is spot on. Kudos to the Supreme Court, because I think this is a step in the right direction. Ultimately, Supreme Court has looked at the regulations and prima facie has seen that there has been no dilution. And therefore, there is no case made out as far as the FPI is concerned. And mind you, Supreme Court has had the record before itself. And therefore, I believe that this is a good, positive signal for Adani as a group. I think today is the day where Supreme Court has rightly, to my mind, declined to interfere. And that's a step in the right direction.
All right, that is, the word coming in on this judgment that has come through by the Supreme Court. But with that, let's move on and bring you some more important updates. The RBI has released a draft circular for banks that proposes new rules for banks' dividend declaration and profit remittance by foreign bank branches to their head offices. Ritu is joining us now to explain this and all of the details. Ritu, take us through what the Reserve Bank is proposing.
That's right. RBI has released a draft circular proposing new rules for the declaration of dividends by banks and the remittance of profits to the head office by foreign bank branches. And these rules are set to be effective from FY25 onwards. Now, to begin with, RBI has proposed that to be eligible to declare dividends, banks must meet the minimum applicable regulatory capital requirement for each of the last 3 financial years, including the financial year for which the dividend is proposed. It is also proposed that only those banks which have a net NPA ratio of less than 6% for the year in which the dividend is proposed can declare dividends, and that is tighter than the 7% net NPA ceiling earlier. However, the maximum dividend payout cap has been raised to 50% compared to what we had earlier, which was 40%. Now, RBI also says that banks will have to be compliant with all existing regulations and not be under any kind of explicit restrictions for declaration of dividends or remittance of profits by RBI to remain eligible. The dividend payable will include dividend on equity shares only, and the total payout is going to be capped depending on the bank's NPA ratio. So, for instance, the ratio for banks will be capped at 50% if the net NPA is 0, 40% dividend payout if net NPA is less than 1%, 15% if net NPA is between 4 to 6%, and so on. Now, these norms will also apply to branches of foreign banks in India which are remitting their net profit or surplus to the head offices. But do note, this is still a draft. Final guidelines will be issued after feedback is received and comments have been invited from stakeholders by the end of January. Now, in terms of the impact of these rules, remember that historically dividend payout ratios have been closer to 20% across banks, and that implies the permissible threshold net NPA ratio between 2 and 6% under the proposed rules. And given that very few banks currently have net NPAs of more than 2%, the impact is going to be limited. And so there's no big reason for banks to change their dividend payout policies per se overall.
All right, Ritu, thanks so much for getting us all those important details. And as we slip into a break on Business Lunch, well, the union budget is less than 30 days away. What is your wish list for the finance minister? Well, presenting the CNBC-TV18 budget ballot box, coming to you in a hotspot near you. We will be placing these ballot boxes at popular public spots like malls, colleges, theatres and others across major cities. We will also be asking the newsmakers who drop into our studios for their budget wish list. So come join us and tell us what is your top budget wish from the Finance Minister. Drop your wish list at a CNBC-TV18 budget ballot box near you. We will complete them and present it to the Finance Minister before she presents the Union Budget 2024. Come join us.
Welcome back. You're still tuned into Business Lunch. Let's bring you a very important word now. Amid speculation of fuel price reduction following several media reports, the Petroleum Minister Hardeep Singh Puri has reiterated that no such discussion has happened with oil marketing companies. He has flat out dismissed all of these news reports as well. So listen in to what he had to say.
First of all these media reports were not only speculative, but I would also turn around and say slightly mischievous. I have clarified there has been no discussion with the oil marketing companies on any such issue. And please, we are in a highly turbulent situation. They are making good profits, but they've also made losses. Let me explain to you. And therefore, I always want the medium to long term. अब देखो इन्होंने जहाँ तक मुझे याद है सब्सिडाइज गैस सप्लाई करने के लिए इनका 28,000 करोड़ का लॉस था जहाँ पर मेरे को याद है और हमने आपको 22,000 करोड़ कॉम्पेंसेट किया हमने मीन्स सरकार की तरफ से सो दैट वाज नॉट टू लॉन्ग बैक पिछले फाइनेंशियल ईयर में किया and under recoveries were much more. There were 30,000 crores. We are in healthy discussion with them every day. But one thing they don't ask me when they get up in the morning, price ऊपर करें नीचे करें. You're deregulated on that. But what we do is we are all working in the same system.
All right, moving on, let's put spotlight on one stock which is buzzing in trade today. Tata Steel, that is under pressure following Kotak's downgrade. And Nigel D'Souza, our colleague, is right here with the details on why the downgrade and what lies in the future for this particular company in terms of fundamentals. Tell us, Nigel.
That's right. Kotak has gone ahead and downgraded Tata Steel to reduce from a buy rating, and the target price now is at around 145 rupees. They say in the last 2 months, the stock price is up by close to around 20%. And that's why now they believe risk-reward is not in favor because fundamentals are still lagging. And they put out 5 broad points that I've taken out of this note. One is that domestic margins will remain under pressure because input costs have spiked up at a far greater pace in comparison to the steel price hike. So that's point number one. Point number two is Europe continues to reel under pressure. Demand is a little bit soft out there. You have pricing as well as spreads that are under pressure. So Europe continues to remain a bit of a pain point. The India business is expanding, and that's good news. And KPO2, that's expected to drive growth. But there's a possibility that there could be delays on that front, which will not be very, very good news. And that could be because there's a capital allocation risk. Since Europe is not really able to support itself, that could be a bit of an issue out there. So that's going to be an important point out there. If Europe is going to be taking much of the bandwidth and much of the capital, then maybe there could be some kind of a rub-off even on the India expansion. So that's another point that they note. And finally, they say that there could be a bit of a delay with regard to that UK deal that they've struck with the government out there. So if that is the case, then that as well will not be very, very good news. Put all this together, Kotak has gone ahead and downgraded the stock to reduce from buy earlier. Back to you.
Okay, around a 2% cut on Tata Steel. In fact, a lot of the metal stocks are down in trade today. But shifting focus now back to some important market opinion. Earlier today, we spoke with Venugopal Garre of Bernstein on how they really see the markets moving in 2024 after the big run that we've seen in the last year. We also asked him about the broader markets in particular because that's where a bulk of the action has been. So listen in to what he had to say.
If you were to think about it, earnings growth this year is fairly decent. Broadly a mid-teens clip for the headline indices and probably higher for SMIDs. But the reality is that are we going to see earnings upgrade this year, especially in a year where macro is decent but not necessarily going to see an incremental positive momentum compared to what we saw last year? And so we actually were big proponents of small and mid caps last year, all through the year. We gave special allocations to SMID, but I have given up right now. So what it means is I'm unable to justify valuations. Midcaps, of course, are trading above fair value at this juncture. That's a fundamental issue. Number two is midcaps in general and even small caps relative to Nifty index are trading at their historic peak in terms of valuation sort of numbers.
All right, on that note, let's slip into a short breather on Business Lunch. But when we return, remember, Israel kills Hamas's deputy leader in Beirut. We'll get you all the updates on that conflict on the other side. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You've tuned into Business Lunch. A quick look at the market, and yes, Nifty 50 as well as Sensex on a status quo with the profit booking. But what is really gaining momentum and strengthening further is the mid-cap universe. Keep an eye on that. And also, Bank Nifty has pared down its losses. It's now inching towards a flat line. So that's the scenario of the market. Metals continue to be the biggest draggers. Now let's shift focus to some global events and getting you some updates on the conflict in West Asia. Well, Israel has killed Hamas deputy leader and military commander in the West Bank, sparking fears that the Gaza conflict could potentially widen. In fact, NBC's Josh reports from Tel Aviv.
The fiery aftermath of an apparent assassination. A senior Hamas leader killed in what Hamas says was an Israeli drone strike on a Hamas office in Beirut. Salah al-Aruri was a deputy head of Hamas on a U.S. wanted list, accused of involvement in multiple terror attacks. Hamas saying 7 people were killed in the strike, including 2 commanders. Israel won't say whether it was responsible, but only one country is at war with Hamas.
Israel is at war. Whoever did this has a gripe with Hamas.
Israel's military has vowed to hunt down Hamas leaders worldwide, saying they're living on borrowed time following the October 7th Hamas terror attacks that killed 1,200 people. As protests erupt in the West Bank, Israel is bracing for potentially massive retaliation, not just from Hamas, but from Hezbollah, another Iranian-backed group allied with Hamas that's also targeted Israel. The new Israeli foreign minister declaring we're in the midst of World War III against Iran and radical Islam. The assassination raising the stakes for Israel's cabinet, which postponed a meeting to discuss Israel's new plan for Gaza after the war. An Israeli official telling NBC News the plan involves local Gazan clans or tribes handling civilian governance, like doling out aid, while Israel controls security indefinitely. This as Israel signals the war is entering a new phase, with thousands of Israeli troops on their way out of Gaza, even as Prime Minister Netanyahu says the war will last many more months.
Palestinian groups are calling for more protests over the assassination, including in Jerusalem and the occupied West Bank.
All right, that is the latest coming out of the conflict in West Asia. Some more important global news that we want to bring you is that authorities are investigating the fiery collision of Japan Airlines passenger jet and a Japan Coast Guard plane on a runway at Tokyo's Haneda Airport on Tuesday, which killed 5 people. This has raised several questions as to why both of the planes were allowed on the same runway at the same time. We have NBC's Tom Costello, who filed this report.
Fire and terror on the runway in Tokyo as a fully loaded Japan Airlines passenger plane arriving on a domestic flight crashed into a smaller Japanese Coast Guard plane. The massive fireball rolling down the runway.
Airport is closed. Airport is closed.
Inside the JAL plane, terrified passengers saw flames outside their windows, smoke rolling through the cabin. Swedish tourist Anton Deba was on board with his family.
I looked to the left and I see flames all over the windows, and the plane starts to shake and all the lights turn dark and everyone starts screaming in Japanese.
Once stopped, passengers evacuated down 2 emergency chutes. As airport firefighters attacked the flames, the plane's tail collapsed to the ground. Exactly the kind of worst-case runway incursion the NTSB has warned about in the U.S. after so many close calls in 2023. The crash happened on runway 34 right, precisely where the JAL Airbus A350 had been cleared to land. The question for Japanese investigators, why was that smaller Coast Guard plane on the same runway, possibly preparing for takeoff? Of the 6 Coast Guard crew members on an earthquake relief mission, only the captain survived, now in critical condition. But all 379 people on board the passenger plane survived, including 8 infants, precisely what flight crews in the U.S. and abroad train for.
Regardless of the size of the aircraft, the FAA requires that within 15 seconds of the aircraft stopping for an accident, it must be able to start evacuating everybody out through the windows, through the doors, in just 90 seconds.
That FAA rule is the global standard.
Get up, get out, leave everything!
Critical to surviving, leaving everything behind and getting out. When an American Airlines plane caught fire in Chicago in 2016, some passengers still grabbed their carry-ons.
When passengers do not follow the instructions and do not leave their belongings in the airplane, they're not only putting themselves at risk, they're putting others at risk because of their blocking exits.
In Tokyo, tragedy, but survival on the runway.
All right, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Business Lunch on Wednesday afternoon. But don't go anywhere. Midcap Radar comes right next. Thanks so much.